we have a lot of data to illustrate that problem-solving, decision-making, situation awareness are key contributing factors into the accident. In IATA, the motto is the following: to lead, to serve, to represent the industry. We see the appetite of the industry moving towards CBTA. I am part of the person that considers that CBTA has nothing to do with time-based experience constraints, what you call non-technical competencies, are assessed with far more accuracy, and therefore it is a no-go to go back to operation.
Hi everyone, I'm Thomas Bessière and welcome to No Train, No Gain, the podcast where we dive into how people shape organizations' success in aviation and other industries. We will explore how people training can highly impact flight safety and drives airline performance. Let's get started. Hi, Yann Renier. I'm very pleased to have you on the first session of this new podcast we are launching with Infact and myself, Thomas Bessière. Today we have the pleasure to have you on this first podcast. So what would be interesting is to know more about you, Yann Renier, and after we have some couple of topics to discuss.
Good afternoon, Thomas, and we can also explain that today we record this podcast at WATS, the World Aviation Training Summit in Orlando. So thank you for having me. My name is Yann Renier. My job title is Head of Training and Licensing in IATA, the International Air Transport Association. And as you ask about me, my background, so I joined IATA 8 or 9 years ago, and what I would express is head of training in IATA is not head of training in an operational organization such as an approved training organization or head of training at airline level. The meaning of head of training in IATA, that means that I am dealing with all pilot training matters from ab initio training, selection, licensing training, and also operator training. Before joining IATA, I was in Air France. I had a career of 26 plus years in Air France and different subsidiaries. I was instructor, examiner, but also I had management position, specifically in the flight standard department and also the regulatory and compliance affair department of Air France. The transition, maybe it's one of your questions, the transition yes. From Air France to IATA, how that happens. In fact, that happens quite naturally because I was the chair person of the IATA training committee. This training committee at that time was called the IATA Training Task Force. And I was already working in IATA, and I got the job proposed in IATA, and the move was made in 2016.
Thank you very much. So what could be interesting is to remind us how did we met for the first time and why you are here in the podcast today. When I had the chance to launch Infact now 7 years ago, we tried to put our background in human factors and neuroergonomics we have from laboratories into operational world for aviation. And at this stage, we met different people and we came to a conference in EASA in Cologne, where you were presenting the first elements of this evidence-based training journey. And this is where I saw you for the first time and I said, okay, it's very interesting, this vision of how can we transform the way we train pilots now and to move from a more, I would say, static training and kind of rigid training to something different. So what could be interesting for us today is to quickly introduce what is for you the competency-based training and assessment or evidence-based training that I've known and that I've heard about for the first time. What is your vision of this and what is for you the impact of this for this industry now and maybe tomorrow?
Okay, so a lot of things to reply to you, Thomas. So first of all, when we met, I do remember. And what I like when we met is your global approach from operation, training, and certification. So this is one aspect that I did appreciate very much at that time. And yes, we met during not the inception of EBT, but when we were working to update the EBT data report. The EBT data report contains the E of evidence, meaning it is a report containing safety and training data. And this analysis of training and safety data leads to the definition of the training topic of EBT. So for the audience, this is just a clarification. E of EBT means evidence. Evidence of what? Safety and training. To define what? The training topic of EBT, which is an operator recurrent training as an alternative to the traditional training and checking. So beyond this first meeting, we have also collaborated specifically during the definition of CBTA type rating, competency-based training and assessment type rating, and we are still in discussion on those matters. So maybe the audience would like to understand better the difference between EBT, CBTA, if there is a difference. So the CBTA is a methodology that is not new because this methodology has been defined in the 60s approximately from a technical perspective. And how we specifically in the pilot training domain, how we move from let's say traditional training to CBTA. So the audience may remember that in the 60s, despite the implementation of checklists, procedurals, and the introduction of the full flight simulators, the accident records were still quite bad, and therefore the industry and the state they became very much interested into the human performance. So it's not a lecture. I try to make it quick, Thomas. I see your smile. And this interest on the human performance led to the definition of CRM, crew resource management, in the 80s. The idea was to use the cockpit resources, the pilot resources in the cockpit, to try to avoid errors and also to trap the errors in case of an error was happening in the cockpit. Afterward, we moved to the 90s with the concept of the threat and error management that permits to better understand the human performance in a dynamic situation such as the flight operations. And after that, EBT has been designed in the years 2008, 2013. And the EBT program used a set of competencies that were the continuation, an enhancement of what we call the CRM skills. And since then, ICAO has decided to formalize what is a CBTA program in terms of principle and how to design and to deliver a CBTA program. This is the very macroscopic and very fast history about, let's say, why we have CBTA today.
Yeah, and it's very interesting. You mentioned maybe for the audience who are not so familiar with CBTA or even aviation training and so on. You mentioned these competencies. We know that the main shift from traditional training to competency-based training is to introduce these competencies that you quickly mentioned, where, if I'm right, you have technical competencies that was in the past the competencies like flight path management, manual, etc. Something that it's usual for trainers to assess and to evaluate. And we have also the non-technical competencies. Like here we are talking about communication, situation awareness, workload management. So a lot of things that are close to human factors. And I think this is where me and my team started to be close to this industry and these new topics, because we are coming from human factors lab at Superhero. We are working for 20 years, you were talking about the CRM and so on. So the human factors understanding, so how the brain works in a dynamic environment such as flight operations. So they worked a lot on this. And we said, okay, maybe there is a way to support industry with this understanding of human factors and human limitation. And here the CBTA and yes, the competency-based training is a very strong way to introduce this concept and a practical implementation of human perspective, I would say. And this is a very good a good way to integrate some things that are in the past that were more subjective, I would say, and try to make it as a lever for trainers to reinforce and to support the resilience of the pilots as well. So what do you think of these non-technical competencies? Do you see some things that are particularly important to mention here, or the difficulties the industry have to introduce these new concepts in the training?
So to reformulate what you have explained, Thomas, the difference between traditional training and competency-based training and assessment, CBTA. Traditional training focus heavily on what we call technical skills. You have mentioned application of procedures, the management of the flight path manually or with automation. And we have realized through the safety record that, let's say, being able to demonstrate those technical skills was not sufficient from a global safety perspective. This is why you have elaborated on what we call in the past non-technical skills, such as communication, problem-solving management, problem-solving and decision-making, situation awareness, or workload management. Why the industry has been interested to develop those skills and to transform them and to formalize them into competencies. It is because those elements, those competencies are essentials to maintain safety in operations. We have a lot of data to illustrate that problem-solving, decision-making, situation awareness are key contributing factors into the accident. So this is why the industry moving into this direction.
Okay, thank you, Yann. It's very clear for me. Where does IATA stand on this topic now, on CBTA implementation? I know it's a big topic in this industry now coming. Where are you now?
So, Thomas, the first thing I would like to remind is that IATA has always promoted the performance-based training, and CBTA is a performance-based approach of training. So in the past, we have heavily supported the implementation of the multi-crew pilot license, the MPL, which is the first initiative to propose a licensing training applying the CBTA approach. Secondly, at the operator training level, IATA was the initiator of the definition of the evidence-based training program. And now what do we do? In IATA, we have the motto is the following: to lead, to serve, to represent the industry, our members. And what we do practically in my department is, first of all, we advocate towards the state and the regulators the need to expand the CBTA methodology. So we do that through workshops and also discussion with the states and the regulators. Once the states and the regulators have understood the need to increase the implementation of CBTA, what happens? In general, there is a specific panel at ICAO or a rulemaking task, in example in EASA, to define the new standard. So currently, we are participating to the ICAO personnel training and licensing panel, which is in charge to, among other activities, to propose what we call a route for CBTA into the Annex 1. Afterward, what do? We support the industry and the states implementing the new standard. So you are very much aware of that. We propose a lot of guidance to implement CBTA. I speak by memory, but I think we have 10 plus guidance on our portfolio. Afterward, we also propose services to practically implement CBTA. This is something that we are doing since 2018. We have supported major training organizations and operators to implement either EBT or CBTA program. And the last piece that is missing in this puzzle is the audit for the CBTA program. And we have a plan to implement what we call a CBTA accreditation for the organizations that are implementing CBTA. So in terms of time frame, we want to implement that in 25 or 26. So this is what we want to do to ensure what? To ensure a proper and harmonized expansion of CBTA across the industry, and also to ensure that the states are in a position to approve and to oversight such a program.
Wow. Okay. Very interesting. It's a lot of initiatives here and very exciting project here at IATA. And we talked about CBTA mostly for pilots today, but I heard that there are some projects, and as you mentioned, to expand it because it's quite successful here. Do you think it can be applied to all aviation professions? And if yes, how and what could be the limitations, you think?
As a training program and training methodology, CBTA can be implemented for any kind of profession. If we consider ICAO standard, currently CBTA applies not only for pilot but also for air traffic controllers, maintenance personnel, flight dispatchers, and CBTA expand beyond ICAO to other under other regulations. I am thinking in EASA to cabin crew. I am thinking inside IATA to the personnel in charge of the dangerous good, let's say, package and management. So CBTA applies to almost all the operational personnel in the aviation currently, depending on the regulations that applies.
Okay, very interesting, very interesting. So we talked about competencies, CBTA standards, and so on different jobs. For you, how can the training and maybe on the spectrum of CBTA, but training in general can be a real lever to improve performance? Because as it's the topic of this this podcast, no train, no gain. We truly believe that the continuous and individualized training and learning of people is kind of foundation for performance and safety in all industry, in particular aviation, because today it's one of our main topic. But according to you, what is the impact of a good training on performance? And do we have still some figures where we can say, okay, CBTA or EBT has been deployed and we can see already some impact in terms of performance or safety?
What I can tell you is every organization that has, let's say, poor safety records, or organization who wants to improve their safety records, they move to such training. Currently, if I check within our data from IATA, we have the IOSA data, the IATA Operational Safety Audit. So we are speaking at this level of operator training. And currently, the latest figures I have, we have 20% of our members that have implemented what I call alternative programs, such as EBT or advanced qualification program in US or ATQP in Europe. So you would say 20%, it's low. It's a low figure, but we see the appetite of the industry moving towards CBTA. We have other kind of data that shows that a lot of regulators have already implemented CBTA regulations in some forms for dangerous good or other domains. And we have a recent ICAO survey that has been conducted by the ICAO PTLP, Personnel Training Licensing Panel, that shows that across 150 respondents, ATOs or operators, almost 50% of them, they have implemented CBTA in some forms. Certainly not exactly as per the ICAO standard, but they have already introduced CBTA. And for those who have not implemented the CBTA yet, 65% of them, they want to implement in the next 3 years. So clearly there is an appetite from the industry and from the regulators. You would say, why this appetite? If we refer to the definition of the competency, and I like very much this definition, so I just introduced the first element of the definition. Competency is a dimension of human performance that is used to reliably predict successful performance on the job. So what does that mean? We train a competence or a set of competencies to do what? To make sure that the operational personnel is able to perform his job safely and efficiently. And this definition is very much important because that means that during the training, those competencies must be challenged in a proper way to make sure that in operation, the operational personnel will be in a position to successfully perform the job. I hope that reply your question. Maybe not.
Yes,
not
definitely. And at the individual level, we can see that focusing on competencies should have an impact on performance, because it has been designed, and the definition I fully align on this. But do you already see on all these organizations that put in place this CBTA or EBT programs or alternative programs, are they able to provide some elements or piece of evidence that it improved their performance or their safety, maybe reduction of occurrences or incidents, or maybe this kind of things? Did you see something like this, or it's too soon to say this kind of things?
To be totally honest, sharing, let's say, piece of evidence regarding the safety records of an organization is not so, let's say, so common. So today, what I have seen is that the CBTA has permitted to clearly identify certain weaknesses in the populations, because we have examples that under a traditional training scheme, let's say the pass-fail rate was quite low. And when an organization implements CBTA, all of a sudden, what you have called the non-technical competencies, they are far more objectively, let's say, assessed. And therefore, the pass-fail criteria, even if it is not a pass-fail criteria, it is a competency go, no go, back to operations, is quite different. But the rate of failure, let's say, after an event has increased because those, what you call non-technical competencies, are assessed with far more accuracy, and therefore it is a no-go to go back to operation. So this is something that has been identified, and that illustrates that CBTA is more demanding compared to traditional training. So this is the kind of feedback that we have. Now, from a global perspective, to have a training data collection that illustrate that the global safety records are, let's say, enhanced, that doesn't exist today at my level, because today we collect safety data in IATA, but we don't collect yet training data, specifically the CBTA training data. So as you touch this point, it is something I have in mind for years, but in terms of resource, we need to have human resource and also financial resource to set up this training data collection and to assess the impact of this training data versus the safety data. And I hope to stay as long as possible in IATA to be able to implement such system that will permit to close the loop between the training and the safety data.
This part is very interesting, because as you clearly and well mentioned, the first step to say we improved performance is first to properly measure performance and assess performance or competencies. And I think a lot of tools that you provide to the industry allow airlines and operators to properly implement this CBTA standard, to standardize instructors, to make sure the the data we collect to assess the performance of an organization are reliable. This is the first step, I understand, of the approach. And the last point you mentioned is very interesting because you said a good way to see if the industry had an impact with this new standard. We need to collect and aggregate the different data from different organizations. And today it's not made because of financial restriction. Is there some other things? Because as you said, we have good ways to collect and aggregate the safety data because it's kind of a standard now. We know how to collect this data from different operators and compare different source of data. In training, it's not the case yet, or is there other limitations for that?
So to make it super clear, today the operators that are running AQP program, Advanced Qualification Program in US, it is at the operator level. So at the operator level, it is possible to make the link between the training data and the safety data because this data is, I would say, intimate to the organization. In Europe, I know that there is an initiative called Data for Safety that tries to put the bridge between the training data and the safety data. This initiative is ongoing. And what I mentioned is purely IATA, let's say, internal discussions. We need to, as we are, let's say, high in terms of safety data collection under the program, which is called Global Aviation Data Management, GADM. I would like to have, let's say, a stream into GADM to include the training data.
Okay, so we talked about performance of organizations and also cross-organization. But what is interesting as well with CBTA or this competency-based training framework is the way we can also adapt the training and make it more adaptive and individualized. That means that identifying strengths and weakness of each individual is just the first step to reinforce the right competencies. It makes it very difficult in operational world to say, okay, we will make a specific training program for each individuals. What is your feeling about this? Is it something we want to achieve, or also the global training design for all individuals can be also a way to standardize some people? But what is your thinking about it?
So clearly, to adapt the training to the trainees' need is part of the CBTA DNA. So it is quite obvious. This is the goal. Why we can achieve that under a CBTA program compared to a traditional training program? It is because under a traditional training program, it is pass-fail based on task. And in a CBTA program, we collect specific human performance elements. First of all, there is a granularity in the level of performance because there is a grading scale from 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest performance and 5 being the highest performance. So we have already a granularity in terms of performance for each competencies. Secondly, depending of the regulation or the organization, it is possible to collect what we call the observable behaviors, which is another human performance element. And we can also collect the context under which the performance has been demonstrated through what we call the threat and error management metrics. So having all this data permits clearly to adapt the training to the individuals. Now, practically what happens? In general, this training data is collected and analyzed, de-identified, and that permits the organizations to, first of all, tailor the training to what I call a population. Example, if deficiencies have been identified for the first officer in the single aisle fleet, and other deficiencies have been identified for the captain on the long range fleet, it is possible from a design perspective to design the program to those, let's say, populations. So it is possible, first of all, to adapt the program to the population level. At the individual level, it is a little bit more complicated because it is an instructor input. And if we take examples that comes from EBT, I have two examples in mind. One operator has decided during the training phase of the EBT module to propose different routes to be followed into the lesson plan. And each route make a special emphasis on specific competencies. So practically, what does that mean? The instructor identified a potential enhancement for the trainee in specific competencies. The instructor will select the proper route to challenge this previously mentioned competency. This is one possibility. Another possibility is to leave, let's say, room into the training session, meaning a time slot of 15, 20 minutes, to permit the instructor to develop further the competencies that necessitate. And in that case, the instructor will pick in a list of events the events that are supposed to challenge specifically the competencies that needs to be further developed. So two examples. It is possible. Now, if we take other training compared to recurrent training such as evidence-based training, the sessions are quite dense. I take the example of a type rating, a CBTA type rating. There is already so much to be placed that to find room specifically to develop the individual competencies is represent a challenge, and the organizations today are facing this challenge on how to clearly individualize the training.
Yes, it seems to be quite difficult compared to the traditional training where the training were more static. Here, it's a big change or for the practical implementation of this. If we have almost one training program per individual, it makes it more difficult. And this is where maybe organizations will need to change the way they do the training, change also the tools they use for the training. But yes, it has a big impact for organizations. So, and there is a big change in the standards for the training globally and worldwide. Also, ICAO is pushing to make some evolutions in terms of training standards. Have you been involved in their development of ICAO? If we talk about it.
Yes, Thomas. I am the member nominated by IATA to the ICAO PTLP, Personnel Training Licensing Panel, and I have been actively involved in the definition of what we call the CBTA route within the Annex 1. The idea is the following for our audience to understand. The Annex 1 is always structured the same way. To get a license, example, commercial pilot license, there are knowledge requirements, skills requirements, flight instruction requirements, and skills requirement. What we try to achieve with what we call the CBTA route is to permit to an organization implementing CBTA to get some flexibilities regarding the experience requirement. And the idea here is to permit the organizations to rebalance the volume of FSTD training and aircraft training. This is what we try to achieve currently. The work of the panel is very much dedicated to that at this time, and we expect to have an outcome in 1 year with an application in 3 years. So the time frame at ICAO are always a little bit long because there is a process to be respected. Our proposal will be sent by ICAO to the state. The state will reply to ICAO, and the final product will happen later. That explains the 3-year period from now.
Very interesting initiatives here. Okay, now I will try to ask you an interesting question for me, and maybe you have an idea about it. We call it the unpopular opinion. Do you think about something that maybe people of your field of expertise, so in aviation or aviation regulation, um, that won't agree with you or that can be unpopular? And do you think about something on this?
Immediately, Thomas, I make the link with what we have mentioned previously regarding the what we call the CBTA route into the Annex 1 of ICAO. This CBTA route propose flexibilities regarding the time-based experience requirement into Annex 1. And this topic is very controversial and sensitive. So I am part of the person that considers that CBTA has nothing to do with time-based experience constraint, because we target a level of performance. We are not targeting to achieve a volume of training. And obviously, others do not share my views, and they want to maintain a prescriptive time-based experience requirement. And we have long discussions about that. Today, the discussion and the controversy is linked to specifically on how to enhance the training experience. As an example, by increasing the credits for the FSTD, let's say, hours, and we are discussing those topics very intensively. So my contradictors, even if they express the value of the FSTD requirements, they don't want to enhance the credits. And in my view, it's a pity, because if we take a basic example that I mentioned very often, what about the astronauts? All the training is done in a simulated environment, and they afterward, let's say, demonstrate performance on their job, meaning into either the rocket or the space shuttle, whatever. And for me, that makes sense into a modern training program such as CBTA to make best use of FSTDs and to use this possibility to decrease the real aircraft time-based experience requirement.
It's very interesting. So I like the position where you say that I can be competent even if I didn't spend hours or years in my position. It's just a question of performance and competencies, and I can just align on this. And the point you mentioned is how to prove that we well assess these competencies or this level of performance, and it's very interesting. Thank you, Yann. Very controversial point of view in our industry, but this was exactly the point of this question. Thank you.
You made a provocation. So.
Okay, so in this you mentioned that of course you have a lot of discussions at ICAO level, at with operations and operators. I understand that there are a lot of projects and a lot of also ongoing standards. What is today the biggest challenge you are facing in your career and also with your different activities at IATA?
So Thomas, I will try to make the link with the previous, let's say, provocative questions about the CBTA route, and it is obvious that one of the very important challenge we are facing today is the capacity of the states and their, let's say, authorities in charge of the oversight of the ATOs and the operators to approve such program and to perform proper oversight of such program. And another unpopular opinion that I have expressed at the panel level is maybe knowing that all the states are not equipped at the same level of expertise, maybe it would be wise to limit the implementation of CBTA to the states that are in a position to perform this proper oversight, and what kind of data to be used to assess the states that are in a position versus those who are not in a position simply is to use ICAO USOAP, meaning Universal Safety Oversight Audit Program, that provides visibility on, let's say, the state's capabilities to implement the critical elements to perform the oversight that are in charge of. And again, I repeat, it is a very controversial one, this one.
I can understand. So, yeah, it seems to be a tricky point. This implementation globally between the states and also the operators locally. But do you think there are some ways to make sure that the data are properly collected, to make sure that we implement a good level of standards in this in this CBTA journey? How can we guarantee that? Do you think can maybe technology help on this? What is your vision?
Regarding the level of expertise of the states, clearly there is a mandate for the oversight, which relates to what we call the critical element number 4, the qualification of the personnel in charge of the oversight. So for me, the first element is to provide a suitable training to this personnel. IATA is committed to support the state because we are currently designing a product to provide the knowledge and also to provide the capabilities to the personnel to approve and oversight a CBTA program. Now, in terms of tools, I don't know currently if there is a tool for authorities to perform the oversight of those CBTA program, but I am not aware of. No, I'm sorry.
No problem. So a lot of projects are coming into this industry, and I think it's a good news for all this industry that always and for a long time wants to continuously improve enhance safety and performance. According to you, what will the world of aviation training will look like in 5 years? Because there are a lot of things. It can take times to implement, but what is your view in 5 years? Do you think this new way to integrate human factors and non-technical competencies in the day-to-day training and with this individual training approach, etc., do you think it will be in place, or what is your vision?
So Thomas, your question is tricky because I am not a psychic. What I see based on experience, 5 years is a very short period of time at our let's say aviation scale. What I have experienced personally and plenty of the persons is that aviation is always acceleration, deceleration because of crisis or because of plenty of good reasons, economic, health problem, COVID. Today we have an unstable, let's say, political game around the planet. So it's difficult to predict because of what? Because CBT implementation requires resource. So the organization will need, let's say, to engage resources, human and financials, to implement something new. And very often there are so much constraints that even if the goal is there is a high appetite, as I repeat what we have elaborated at the beginning of this podcast. Even if there is a high appetite, maybe the progression will be slower compared to expected. So what I expect is a progression of the implementation of CBTA, but I cannot imagine that tomorrow 100% of the operators would be running CBTA program. Today, I repeat, IOSA data, 20% only of our members are engaged into EBT or AQP. So I consider a progression for sure. But to tell you it will be the double of 20%, I cannot guarantee that.
Okay, thank you. As of today, how do you think the aviation industry and the training in aviation industry could be improved? So CBTA is definitely, and we mentioned this during this podcast, but CBTA is a level of improvement. But do you see some other areas where we can still improve?
Improvement when I see the let's say in terms of the three components of our aviation system, we have the process, we have the people, we have the tools. In terms of process, we have from high level perspective, the ICAO process are in place, they are visible, they are accessible. So now I would say the process being in place, the effort relates first of all on the qualification of the personnel designing first of all the program, the course developer. Secondly, to continue the enhancement of the instructor qualification, and already mentioned very importantly the qualification of the what we call the CASI, the Civil Aviation Safety Inspector, in charge of the approval. Now, in terms of tools, you provide some tools. Other, let's say, stakeholders are providing some tools. I am not an expert in tools, but what I can imagine is certainly more and more, let's say, introduction of the artificial intelligence to make more sense and to analyze all this training data that is now generated by the CBTA program, and to make it let's say meaningful and also practicable at the manageable at the organizational level. Because I bet today we collect a lot of things, but is it well managed? It is another question.
Yes, and I think this is why I think tools designed for data sharing and collaboration between different operators and stakeholders can be very important for this industry, because we talk about safety, and here when it comes to safety, there is no competition in our industry, and this is something important. Okay, so maybe to move to the conclusion, I'm used to say that for us at Infact, and I think this is something we share together, training and continuous learning can be a tool to leverage the performance and success of people and organizations. That's why we always ask this question to our guests, and I would like to ask you as well. What was the last thing you learned in your personal and professional life?
Tricky question, Thomas.
We always learn a lot of things, but
I think in the last years, yes, in the 5 last years, what I have learned is to, in some ways, to step back. I try to explain the meaning of this statement. Is in the past, if we take the example of the ICAO work, we had very much a caricatural battle between, let's say, IFALPA and IATA about, let's say, the time-based experience requirement as an example. And now to be a little bit more in the shadow, I would say, and nevertheless participating to the work, the situation is less caricatural, and in fact, ICAO is mainly composed by state representative, and therefore the topic belongs now more to all the members of the panel, and the situation is less caricatural, and therefore I have noticed that in fact the progress made by the panel was far better compared to the past. So stepping back in some cases is also a good approach.
Very interesting. Doing less to do more. Finally, it's very interesting, this one. And also, what is the last thing you taught to someone?
So Thomas, the last thing I taught to someone was to play chess to my son. And when you get older like me, the things you appreciate are very often more and more simple, such as to play chess with your relatives or closest relatives.
It's good to know. Before leaving our listeners, would you like to add something or say goodbye?
Alors, just before saying goodbye, I would like just to say something from the bottom of my heart is don't be afraid. This is some may remember this statement from a famous pope. Don't be afraid by your face. And our face in this industry is very common, is to increase safety. CBTA is the tool of today and certainly one of the best solutions to increase safety. So don't be afraid to implement, and the return on investment will be there. So this is my final word, Thomas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yann, and thank you for what you do for this industry. It's very instructive, and we hope that this movement will take a big part of our industry, because I'm fully convinced that including more element of each humans, and more taking into account their strength and weakness to make them even better, just could be something positive. So thank you so much, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Thomas.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. You can find them on Spotify and on our website, infact.com. At Infact, we are committed to make a new generation training software leveraging AI and data for people training. And thank you for listening. See you next time.